Welcome to Replenish the Atmosphere of Discovery, where we discover the Master's plan for our lives. Today, we are going to talk about the power of presence. Presence. Your presence is your existence, you showing up in your originally intended form, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Okay. Your presence is your existence. It is you showing up in your originally intended form, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. So when your physical presence enters a place, all other parts of you should be in balance and authentic, right? They shouldn't all be exposed in depth in every place, right? But what you do, you allow yourself to be shown, and what you do expose should not be on display in any form less than what God's design of you is. Okay. So even though you may not expose all parts of you, the very depths of your being, right? What you do show should be, right, God's design of you, not what society has created you to be, not what your parents may have created you to be, what you have created you to be. When you show up, your presence should be in your originally intended form, all parts of you. Okay. So the power of your presence expresses the ability or capacity to directly influence or produce a response from any environment, person, or culture. The power of your presence expresses the ability or the capacity of your presence, right, to directly influence or produce a response from any environment, person, or culture. So, an example is the power of the presence of God that is seen in all of creation, right? He left his mark on his creation. So, think about how he created Earth, right? How he made everything to reproduce another of its kind. He created us, right? Which we should be in his image. He put himself into us so that we can make more of us, right? He's not making new people. He's not forming new people, right? He created people to make more people. He created the trees with the seeds and the fruit with the seeds and the vegetables with the seeds inside of themselves to reproduce on their own, right? He created people to make more people. How are we doing with that assignment? Right? Are we helping people to be transformed into the likeness of his image? Right? Or are we failing because we fail ourselves to become his image? Right? So his presence in us, when we understand the power of it, produces his image. Okay? Not our image, his version, not your trauma's version, his version, not society's version, his version, right? His version, his image. And if we are in his image, then we have to stop hiding the God part of us from the world, right? We have to stop giving people the defected, defiled version of ourselves and give them who we were originally intended and designed to be, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. However, he created you to be, that's how you're supposed to be. Okay. Whatever space that we show up in, we must show up as God's image of us, his view of us, what he intended for us to be. All facets of our being, right? Our minds, our spirits, right? Our emotions, our bodies need to show up authentic and balanced amongst each other. And so sometimes we show up physically, right? But we have a different spirit in tow, right? That spirit is not aligning with our body, right? Our spirit is like somebody else's spirit, right? Other times we are spiritually sound, spiritually balanced, but we're looking like and dressing like and sounding like other people. So all facets of our being should show up, right, as our authentic self. So your presence is just as powerful as the absence of your presence. So you being in a place is just as powerful as you not being in a place, right? Not being where you shouldn't be is powerful. If you're not in a place that you ain't supposed to be, that's powerful, right? And sometimes it takes an act of God to keep you out of those places, right? Sometimes your finances have to stop because you keep going to the place you're not supposed to be. Sometimes your vehicle has to stop because you keep driving to the places you're not supposed to be. So being where you should be is equally as powerful. And sometimes it takes an act of God, right, to get you there. And because sometimes you end up in rooms and amongst people that you know that it took nothing but a miracle for you to get to that place, right? So your presence is just as powerful as your absence. You should not be in the places you shouldn't be, but you absolutely should be in the places that you are called to be in. So your presence reveals intentions. It reveals the level of intimacy, the closeness, the access that someone has to you, and their acceptance of you. Okay. Your presence reveals your intentions, the level of intimacy you have with someone, their closeness and access to you, and their acceptance. Your lack of presence also reveals the same. So your presence can be a gift or a curse if it's at the wrong place in the wrong time. So your presence can be a gift or it could be a curse, right? It can bring destruction or it can bring peace. You can bring people out of darkness, out of confusion, out of stagnation, out of abuse, out of torment, out of being in their own way, right? Because you are supposed to be in that place. Your presence can bring someone into, right? So it can bring someone out of and it can bring someone into alignment with God's plan. It can bring someone into their purpose, into their strength, right? Into power, into the future that has been prepared for them. Your destiny aligning with the right people in the right places makes it complete. Okay, but you're not just completing your destiny, you're completing the destiny of others that are in the right place at the right time. Okay, your destiny aligning with the wrong people in the wrong places will destroy your destiny, and not just your destiny, right? But the destiny of the other people. So the perception of your presence is received through your body language, through the tone of your voice, what you wear, and also how you connect and interact with other people. All of these things are interpreted differently depending on a person's culture, depending on their triggers, depending on how they see you, how they value you, right? So it is important that those factors are considered before you respond how you think or how you feel, right? Before you respond because of what you think, because of however you feel in that moment, get an understanding. And this is why we should be balanced and complete so that we do not present ourselves in a way that intentionally offends, even if it appears that we are intentionally offended by others in the room. Okay, you don't do tit for tat. We don't do eye for eye anymore. Okay, you should manage your peace in such a way that it is not easily stolen by perceived offenses and insults. Okay, because you have to give it away. It has to be stolen. Okay. Remember, we learned last week that peace is the guard that covers us, that keeps us protected from receiving. They can throw the insults and the offenses, but we don't have to receive them. Okay. What people do in your presence signifies the state of their heart, which is the same way what you do in certain people's presence signifies the state of your heart. But it may not be a personal response to your presence, but it's up to us to discern that. So this is what we're learning to do right now. So even if somebody else doesn't know that, we are learning that, okay? The way someone responds may not be personal to you. It's up to us to discern that. Some stuff we take as an offense or an insult before understanding that this person came into this place broken in some places, right? Maybe your presence It's what will bring them to fullness by you responding as the light, right? Instead of responding in a way that destroys peace for everybody, for you and for them, right? So it's up to us. We are commissioned to be the peace in the place, right? We're not supposed to be the peace breakers. We're supposed to be the peace makers. Okay, so it's up to us to discern if what they're saying or how they're feeling is even attached to us. Our face is the most visibly expressive part of our body, and our heart and mind are the most invisible expressive parts. And these two expressive components of our being will cause us to judge right or to judge wrong. Okay. You will judge a facial expression wrong when you are not whole, right? When you are not at peace within yourself. You will also judge the intent of someone's heart wrong, right? When your spirit is already disturbed. You can judge rightly when your spirit is whole so that you can spiritually discern the visible looks and the invisible content of their heart. Okay, does that make sense? So, what does your presence mean to you? Is it something that you value? Right? What is the first thing that you think is noticed about you that is not physically perceived? Like, what is it that your presence bring to the place? Right? Is it your integrity? Is it your hope? Is it the peace that you bring? Like, I want to know what you think your presence brings to a place. Let's talk about how your presence reveals who can access you and what they have access to, right? So even when you have to be in the presence of people that you do not align with, right? But you have to be in their presence, you don't give them access to every part of you, like your mind and your spirit, right? Just because they are in close physical proximity. And this is not saying you hide who you are or revert to obtaining a false identity, right? You just limit their access to your mind and to your spirit. You want to utilize this, especially like in the workplace or in the company of those that have issues that you don't want to affect you, right? Which we should be able to discern if somebody has an issue. You don't have to give that job, that organization, that person access to hold the power to change your day, to change your mind, right? And influence your emotions. We learned about what boundaries to set and which ones should be non-negotiable. We learned that in session 37. So please go back and check that out if you're having trouble knowing how to set boundaries or when to set boundaries and what boundaries should be non-negotiable. Your peace should be non-negotiable. Okay. Knowing how to limit people's access to certain parts of you keeps you fully present without exposing any parts of you to be affected by their negative influence. Whatever you allow to infiltrate any part of you, your spirit, your mind, right, your body, whatever you allow before you go and before you leave matters. Okay. No one else should hold the power of your presence except for you. No one should hold the power of your presence except for you. When you place this power in someone else's hands, they become your master instead of the Lord, right? No one should solely have the power to place you or replace you except God. And this is what happens when you trust man rather than God. They end up misplacing you, right? The lack of your presence can be a consequence. It can be a penalty. It can be a curse. It can be a consequence of a broken boundary. So the reason why you're not in a place is because somebody crossed that boundary, right? Or it can be a curse or a penalty to those that have rejected you, right? When you're not in a place because you tried to do what you were told to do by God and you experience rejection there, well, now a lot of times what happens is what they were going to be or what they were going to do, they no longer are going to do because they rejected the help, right? It was written in your destiny plan to help this place, but they rejected you. And what are we supposed to do? Shake the dust off. So The lack of your presence or the lack of someone's presence, if you think about somebody not showing up, sometimes it's because there was a boundary crossed, right? Or sometimes it can be a penalty. And then sometimes people are just in their feelings, but you have to discern which it is. Okay. So some things won't ever come into existence because you have not arrived yet. Okay. Some roads will remain closed. Some rooms will remain locked. Some destinies will remain undiscovered because you have not showed up yet. This is the power of your presence. Okay. The manifestation of God's glory in the earth is measured and revealed by what the world sees when we come into their presence. Do they meet God when they see you? Right? What do you think his purpose was when he created you in his image? Do you think it was to look how you've been looking or feel how you've been feeling? Or he created you in the likeness of his image for a purpose, for you to do what he created you to do so that this world can experience God in the form of our hands, in the form of our words, and our feet, and our gifts, and our talents. Okay. Do they see God's divine plan at work? Or do they see a diminished version of his greatness through you? Is your presence producing God-sized results because he's in you? And I mean God-sized as in what God expected and created you to be, not somebody else's false revelation of who you are, right? Is your presence producing God-sized results? His version of you, okay? Your presence should be a witness for others of the goodness of God, not a failure. Okay. God extends his provision, his protection, his promises for his name to be glorified, right? Not to be seen as insufficient because of our lack of faith in who he said that we are. Okay. It's not insufficient because it's insufficient, right? It's insufficient because we are not walking in the power of our presence. Have you considered what power your presence holds in certain places and then also where it is diminished in other places? Is your presence admired? Is your presence invited? Are people and places full when you leave because you've given them eternal pieces instead of temporary things that fade away? Right? Remember, that's what peace is. When you are whole because you have those eternal pieces intact, right? Not the temporary things. Your presence has the power to hold itself in people's minds without you ever going to that place again. If we realize that, we really would stop being so contentious with people. Your presence has the power to hold itself in people's minds without you ever going there again. Okay. You have that holding power when, in spite of stress, in spite of emotions, in spite of failures, in spite of lack, you remain in the same state, balanced, right? Because you are equipped to withstand and you are graced to maintain your purpose for being in that space. That's what gives you that holding power. Okay. Your presence holds its position and what you were granted the authority to do, right? It has that staying power. The recognition of your presence can drive people away from a place. Just somebody mumbling that you're going to be there, right? It can drive people away from a place or into a certain place, right? Just the recognition of your presence. Your presence has the power to keep replaying and reoccupying someone's mind. This is the power of your presence. The impact you leave remains long after your physical presence leaves that place. And that's why it is important sometimes, right, to know what came before you so that you understand the difference that you need to make. Sometimes we don't need to know what came before us. We just need to go into that place and be obedient. Your presence continues to reoccur continues to pop up and occupy the mind, emotions, and spirits of others, even when your physical presence is gone. Okay? So, what you do and what you say and how you come into the presence of others will have a positive or negative echo. Okay? It's called a reputation, right? It is when your presence has a positive or negative echo. It continues to reoccur. It continues to reoccupy the mind, the spirit, and the emotions of the people in your presence. What have you echoed? What have you echoed in the last place that you were in? What have you echoed in the mind and the emotions and the spirit of those in the place that you just left? Everything does not stop when you leave a place, right? The essence of your presence lingers like an aroma, right? That echoes even long after you're in the grave. What is it speaking? What will your presence say to your next generations? Because what you've done and what you've said and how you presented yourself continues long after you're gone. So we have to stop acting how we feel like acting. Sometimes how we feel is a lie because it's based on false information, right? Stop saying whatever you think when you haven't processed the full thought yet, okay? Because it is occupying more than just someone's ears. What you are doing with your presence forfeits time when it is placed in eternity by the echoes of your influence. Okay? You can't just say whatever. You can't just do whatever. Your presence has the power to align, to define, to create, to break, to bind, and to kill. How you present yourself and how you respond to people, no matter the size of the space or the status of the person, determines your position in history. And we need to understand that. When you think about the presence of God, we often say sometimes, oh, I don't feel him, right? But he's omnipresent. Do you feel your organs? Do you actually feel every organ in your body? Like feel them, not hear them, not feel the beat, but feel them in your body. How do you know you have lungs, right? Because you're breathing. That's how you know you have lungs. It's not that you actually feel the presence of your lungs, but you know you have lungs because you are breathing. So we know God is here and God is there because there's no place that he is not, right? But his tangible presence is felt when we connect and accept that the effects can only manifest if he is present. I'm going to say that again. God's tangible presence is felt when we connect and accept that the effects of his presence can only manifest if he's there. So if you understand that, then understand that the effects of your presence confirm where you are and where you have been. When you see the response, when you see the effect of your presence, you know that you left a mark. You know that your presence was felt whether anyone will ever admit it or not to you, right? So the same way you don't feel your organs in your body, but you know they're there because of the effect, right? Because our body is operating normally. We know they're there. Okay, same way with your presence. When you see the effect, you know where you've been, right? And you know where you are. I hope that really makes sense to you. And I hope that we really start to value the power of our presence. If you do not start to value the power of your presence, you will find yourself continually in the wrong places. And I don't mean just the wrong places physically. You will find yourself in the wrong place emotionally. You will find yourself in the wrong place mentally and spiritually. Okay. And being in the wrong place can kill your spirit, right? It can kill you emotionally and it can even kill you physically, right? In the presence of God is the fullness of joy, not half a cup, not just enough, right? But an abundance of joy. And if we dwell with him and he is in us, right? He is wherever we go. Do we think that our influence is what it is just because of us? No, it's because of what he made us full of, right? And it's not just joy. He filled you with gifts and talents and graces, right? Do you think that your lack of influence is because of him? No, right? It's because we fail to operate in the authority granted to us to influence every space that we go in. Okay? Shouldn't that fullness that God created in you be made available to others who may be lacking in that specific area that God made you full of because? Just because it's a part of your destiny plan? Right? Shouldn't that fullness that he gave you be made available to the people that are not full in that area? Right? Your presence should bring out the best in other people, not their worst, unless they have evil in them, right? People in places with evil in them are tormented by people that are full of God things, okay? But if there's no evil, your presence should bring out the best in people. Don't show a passive presence. Okay. Your presence speaks volumes. It speaks loudly, right? Even in subtle doses. Okay. You don't have to be in a place for a couple of hours in order to influence that place, in order to influence those people. So don't allow anything to cause you to devalue or diminish the power of your presence. Your presence echoes, okay? Your presence is historical. Your presence is eternal, okay? So what you do and what you say and how you present yourself to others is going to echo long after you're gone. And so we must be intentional and make sure that we're not being lied to, right? We're not being lied to by our eyes and by our ears and by our lack of understanding. It's up to us to discern the spaces that we're in, the people that are in those spaces. And we don't act like the people if we are sent there, right? We act like the image of God, right? And that's the image that he created you to be. So if you go into a place and now you're acting like them, that's not his image, right? We want to fully be who God has created us to be. We want to be whole in all parts so that the places that we are full in, we can help those that we are called to get to that place as well. And we're able to fill them with those eternal parts that won't fade away. Okay. So I hope that you all understood the power of your presence. I hope you take it seriously. I hope you stop just being in places just because you physically can, just because you emotionally can, just because you mentally can go to that place doesn't mean you should, right? And stop not being in the places you're supposed to be in. There's doors that won't open because you didn't show up, right? There's ways that won't be made because you were the part that God destined to make the way. What we have to understand is God always has a reserve. He always have a remnant. And even though those people at that time rejected Jesus, how many people accepted him? Like we're still accepting Jesus right now. There's new converts accepting Jesus long after that period when he was rejected where he was, right? So I think it's a mixture of, number one, us going where we're sent, right? And number two, truly having confidence and value in our presence. When I go to where I'm called to, there is a difference. There is a shift, right? Whether I am seeing the result of that in that moment or if it'll happen 100 years from now. But we have to have confidence and faith that if God called us to this, there is a difference being made. And so sometimes we can get caught up on our eyes lying to us. Our eyes, our physical eyes, cannot see eternity. We cannot even see the next 5 minutes unless God gives us a vision, right? But the effects of our presence, the effects of it, right? The response of it is what proves that we were there. We got to be mindful of that and understand it even from the perspective of Jesus. He went where he was supposed to go, and people still today are still accepting him, regardless of those that are rejecting him. And then it's also, are we showing up in those places as our God intended purpose? Like, are we showing up as a lesser version, right? Are we showing up with the thought that I might have to heal the sick, I might have to raise the dead, I might have to cast out demons, right? And it may not just be those things, it may be the job, right? What did God destined you for in that place? Are you doing it, or are you allowing yourself to be intimidated by the darkness? Are you allowing yourself to be intimidated by what you feel is a lack of light? I remember this story of this minister. He actually went to Africa with a group of ministers, and they were supposed to speak to hundreds of thousands of people. And all of the other ministers dropped out. So it was just this one guy. And he was like, God, how can I minister to all of these people with all of these people dropped out? And God's response to him was, one drop of my blood, one drop of my blood. Like, it's in God's power to do the thing. We just have to be willing vessels to go where he tells us to go, and don't go. We might be in the right place, but are we doing it 100% of the way with full confidence of what God has given us to do it? And a lot of times after this happens multiple times, after you're rejected or abandoned multiple times, it will diminish your confidence, right? And sometimes we can begin to shift the confidence on ourselves, when if we really understood the power of the presence of God in us, that people don't recognize yet, they have to be introduced to that. So if you're going with the presence of God in you and you show up any dark place, it doesn't matter how big the place is or how many people are there, the darkness has to bow to the presence of God. And it only will do that when we accept our authority and walk in our authority 100%. Like, I believe that sometimes we go in places kind of unsure. Like, there's a little doubt if God called us to this place, or there may be a little doubt if we're capable. But if we go into these places that God sends us, go in it with the mindset that I might have to raise the dead. Don't go with the mindset of something that you can do, right? Like, I might be able to hug every person in the place. That's something you can do, right? That's not a God-sized thing. If we go into places and we automatically think I might have to raise the dead, that means you totally are depending on the power of God, right? And so that might help us when we start to feel rejected a lot. Okay. And when we are rejected, he tells us to dust our feet off, right? And if he that's what he tells us to do, and we continue to go back to those places when that was all God wanted you to do. He wanted you to plant the seed, right? And somebody else is supposed to come back and water. So that happens too. We go to a place and then we keep going back to the place when somebody else was supposed to water the seed that we planted. So I hope that encourages you and helps all of us, really, as we do what God has created us to do. Meditate on the power of your presence, knowing that God is within you. God is within you. He's more than a world against you. And not to operate so much on what we feel and what we see naturally, but to spiritually discern what we're seeing, what we're feeling, processing our thoughts. So when our thoughts start going in the opposite direction of our destiny, it's up to us to stop it. Nobody else is going to stop it for us because they can't take the thoughts out of our head. It's up to us to get to a place or get around some people. That's why community is important. Getting around some people that can sort stuff out for us until we get back on the right train. So God bless you all, and I will see you all next Friday at 3 o'clock. Be blessed.